Hello, freaks, geeks, degenerates, nerds, basement dwellers, you beautiful scruff-tards, and the occasional annoying Vatnik. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Skruffytalez. And in this video, we will be taking a look at Russia being willing to trade Kherson and Zaporizia Oblast for the entirety of the Donbas. There's just one problem with that, though. The Ukrainians are doing a pretty good job in defending the Donbas, or that last corner of the Donbas, I should say. So we'll take a look at all of that. And also, several mappers are now indicating that basically half of Pokrovsk is contested. The Russians are, of course, claiming that half of Pokrovsk has fallen and is under Russian control. But it does seem as there might be more to it, as in Russia having been able to infiltrate large portions of the city without being in control of it, right? So they're using these 2 to 3 man infiltration units to cause chaos. So we're gonna be taking a look at all of that. So let's get into it. So first news that we have to report on is Russian casualties. Take a look. This is all from The Economist, all the graphs and the news here. In 2025, for every Ukrainian soldier killed, 5 Russian soldiers die. And I mean, it's kind of been the numbers throughout the war. And take a look at these graphs. I mean, here you have the casualty estimates for Russia. Total amount of casualties and the amount of the casualties that are deaths from the beginning of the war. I mean, this is in the millions. So 1 million soldiers right here. So you have beyond 1 million casualties and something like maybe 300,000 dead of that total. I mean, it's just a disaster. And I mean, take a look at these figures and compare it to Russian territorial gains throughout the war. I mean, they started off, decently well when they surprised attack the Ukrainians. No one believed that they would attack. Everyone thought this was just saber rattling to get an arms race going, to kick off another Cold War, so that Russia could remilitarize the nation with this big threat of NATO. But no, they were dead serious and invaded and took everyone by surprise, and pushed strongly. And the evidence is that that push for Kyiv, that big armored column, that was not a combat formation. They were intent on driving straight to Kyiv and occupy it, and failed miserably in doing so. They tried to drive in a straight line as fast as possible to reach Kyiv in order to occupy it, and failed. And then the Ukrainians, of course, started to fight back, and the Russians retreat, and the Ukrainians counterattack, and we end up down here. Because the Russians, they weren't prepared for the Ukrainian counterattack, and the only thing that saved the Russians was this big minefield that Surovikin put in place, this huge minefield that went across the entire length of the front line, and made it really, really difficult for the Ukrainians to try and advance because there were mines everywhere. And since then, Russia has gained 1.3% of Ukrainian territory. From September of 2023 to September of 2025, 1.3% of Ukrainian territory. So this 2023 to 2025, over here, I mean, you can see how this has escalated, and not in the worst case possible, in the worst way possible for Russians. September 2023 to September of 2025. And in this time span, they gained 1.3% of Ukrainian territory. I mean, no, this is a complete disaster for the Russian military. So keep all of that in mind, because Trump and Putin has had their telephone talk about peace talks for Ukraine, and allegedly Trump has reconsidered sending Tomahawks because Putin didn't want him to send Tomahawks. Jesus Christ, if that's true. But anyway, so in those talks, according to rumors, Putin did offer peace terms, that he would surrender Kherson and Zaporizia, but in exchange for Russia gaining control over all of the Donbas territory, right? So Russia gets the Donbas and Ukraine gets back Kherson and Melitopol, Zaporizhia. So that's the deal that Russia's offered. Now, here's the thing, though. I mean, it is basically a Russian victory that you're handing over to Russians, because over here you have vast amounts of natural resources. You allow Russia to gain all the natural resources that the Ukrainians need to rebuild their country. This is also where you have untapped gas reserves underground. Gas reserves that rival the gas resources found in Norway, right? So a huge amount of money is buried in the ground in the Donbas, and of course the Russians want it. Now, keep in mind, though, what we've been talking about here, the extreme losses that the Russians have suffered, because in 2025, 34% of those losses have been suffered here, in this small area right here, in the Pokrovsk area. 34% of all Russian losses in 2025 along the entire front line has happened here, in this tiny area, because the Russians, of course, they're striving to take the Donbas, and as you can see, there's only this small corner left of the Donbas region, and the Russians are trying to punch through here to secure the remaining territory of the Donbas, and they've suffered tremendously trying to do that with extremely little gains. So of course they're gonna try and negotiate away, fighting through this hellhole, and gain all of this without a fight. Because when we zoom in here, let me tell you, this is a proper fight for the Russians. So we're gonna zoom in here. We're gonna highlight where the border is. Let's use blue. We're gonna use green. So this is the border of Donetsk Oblast and the border of the Donbas territory. It goes all the way up here even. Now, the Russians, they want to secure all of this. There's just one issue, or several issues for the Russians. That is, you have Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Doroshivka, and Konstantinivka over here. And these are huge urban areas. These are two large cities with multiple towns that are like intermingled. They have grown together into a solid urban, massive urban area that is an urban fortress. And Russia will be hard pressed to fight through this. Russia has not a single advantage pushing in here. So this is almost an impenetrable wall for the Ukrainians. Russia can't push through here, not without huge resources pushed into trying to achieve this. And then you have down here the current issue for the Russians, Pokrovsk and Myrnorod, two smaller cities that are interlinked with towns. And behind that you have Dobropilya, also a small city that Russia will more than likely struggle with. And the issue here is that Ukraine has built out of Izium further north as well, but from Izium down here, whoop, wrong one, we're going to use this one, the famous Sirsky line. And it comes, what? Hello. The famous Sirsky line that comes down here behind Sloviansk and Kramatorsk, and it kind of snakes its way over here, something like this, and comes up north of Dobropilya, and comes down here, and then continues over, something like this. And between the fortress belt and the Sirsky line, you can see here you have some dams, you have some water features, you have water features up here, and I believe there are some water features down here as well. There's a river that comes up this way. It actually comes up more like this, and it continues all the way up towards Kramatorsk. So, yes. So at Pokrovsk, in this small area, in 2025, Russia's lost 34% of all their casualties for 2025. 95,000 troops in this small area. When the Russians took Bakhmut, that cost them 80,000 troops to take Bakhmut. Russia has not yet taken Pokrovsk. They haven't taken Myrnorod. They are not close to Dobropilya. And they have already suffered 95,000 troops in this area, far more than what they lost at Bakhmut. And that is trying to take Pokrovsk. They're not in Myrnorod. They haven't reached Dobropilya. They haven't tried to fight their way through the Syrskyi line. They haven't tried to fight their way past these fortified rivers. And haven't tried to fight their way up along this river. And they are not close to pushing into the fortress belt. So you can imagine the amount of manpower and resources required to take the remaining parts of Donetsk Oblast and gaining control of the entirety of Jesus, it escapes my mind. The Donbas, right? On top of that, we have another town over here, Siversk, that the Russians are only now getting close to. But I mean, they've been here for 2 years, and they have pushed something like 15 kilometers over here in 2 years' time. Pushing the front line from over here to over here in 2 years, 15 kilometers. So as you can see, the Russians are well and truly struggling in this part of the battlefield. And it's going to cost them tremendous amounts of resources, not to mention manpower, to pushing through Pokrovsk, Myrnor, Dobropilya, never mind the fortress belt. So Putin has said, hey, if we give them Kherson and Zaporizia Oblast, we can get all of this, and then we are in complete control of all natural resources that the Ukrainians need to rebuild their country. I mean, why would Ukraine agree to those terms when they know that this area favors Ukraine to such an extent that the Russians will truly suffer pushing through here? That the Russians have no advantages at all trying to push through this area to reaching this border. I mean, they're struggling down here, and down here you have once again a small river coming up this way. Well, wrong again. What the hell? There we go. So there's a small river that comes up here, and it continues over to something like that. And here you have a small town. And the Russians are struggling reaching it. They are attacking here. They're not content with holding the border. They're actually trying to reach this small town. I forgot the name of it. And they've reinforced this front line, and their gains are minimal at best. I mean, this is a complete disaster for the Russians. Never mind this failed push north, and they tried to push through Rudinsky as well. They tried actually to come all the way through Rudinsky, all the way out here. But as you can see, none of that took place. It was only the push north that had some form of success. But the push west through Rudinsky, complete failure. The Ukrainians shut that down on day one. Did not happen at all. So I understand the Ukrainians, why they are hesitant to accepting these peace terms when they know that they have such a huge advantage over the Russians in this area. If the Russians really want the Donbas, the Russians have only one choice, and that is pushing through Pokrovsk to Dobropilya and trying to push through the fortress belt. And behind all of this, you have the Syrskyi line. Water features, smaller towns and more towns and fortified positions. And the thing is, between Dobropilya and Pokrovsk, I mean, the Ukrainians have built... wrong color again, god damn it. something like this. This here is the main fortified area between these two cities and the Syrskyi line. So they have fortified supply lines leading into Pokrovsk. And they know that if the Russians want to push up towards Dobropelia, then they have to move through this heavily fortified area before they reach Dobropelia, before they even reach the heavily fortified Syrskyi line. And over here, it's a huge hub of defensive lines as well. Why, I don't know, but it's a massive hub of defenses built right here. Probably because the Ukrainians want to be able to support if the Russians do come up here in between the Syrskyi line and the fortress belt, then they can direct attacks out from this defensive hub. Same way if the Russians tried to move on Dobropelia, then they could, push defenses, support defensive operations here, which we saw them doing, right? The Russians ran into a wall and it was a dead stop, and the Ukrainians then just pushed them back. So of course the Ukrainians know that in this area they can grind down the Russians and inflict tremendous casualties, and no wonder that Putin all of a sudden says, yeah, you know what, if we give back Kherson and Zaporizia, we can keep all of this, so we don't have to fight our way through it and suffer huge horrendous casualty figures and battlefield losses trying to achieve this for the next 10 years. So the Russians, Putin, I think he's starting to slowly realize that this was a mistake. Attacking Ukraine was a mistake, and he's ready to negotiate his way out of it. Because they realize, the Russians, what they're up against here. And this will be no fun at all whatsoever for the Russian army fighting their way through this area. So we're going to be talking about Pokrovsk now a bit, because all the mappers have, or most of the mappers have updated. You can see here, we're going back a couple of days. All of a sudden you see a lot of contested territory that has not been contested before. But it now all of a sudden aligns with Russian maps, how far the Russians have advanced. That has to be said. The same thing, that was Andrew Perpetua. Now we're seeing Mayakovsk 73. And Deep State, if we jump over to Deep State, you can see here, going back, you see here now, boom, we have Russians here, and all of this is contested. But we have to understand a thing or two here, that what we're seeing more than likely is Russian infiltration units operating behind Ukrainian lines. Because if we go back here, Russian deep reconnaissance group fighting off Ukrainian infantry, Russian ambush, so a couple of Ukrainians were walking on the street and got gunned down, and you had a drone strike over here and stuff like that. So this is what's been reported on, and we can see here Russian shelling. Russia has shelled this part of town forever. I mean forever. And then this happens. Why? But there's also this, if the mappers decide to show all of this as contested, then there must be something more to it, right? I guess. But all at the same time, they show Volodymyrivka as contested, and this push here as being contested territory, even if, by the looks of it, Ukraine wiped out all the Russians that took part in these attacks. So it is a bit confusing what's going on. Is Russia over here or up here? Or is it deep reconnaissance groups, these Jaeger-style commando units that are operating behind enemy lines? Because, down here, Russian infantry shot by small arms. And if you read up on this situation, ISW thinks that this was a small Ukrainian infiltration unit. So, is Ukraine down here? Why isn't this yellow? Because probably it was just a small Ukrainian infiltration unit doing shenanigans behind enemy lines. And Russian infantry shot by small arms, right? I think, you have it here as well. Russian soldier ambushed, and stuff like that. And here you have, here you have Ukrainians fired at Russian solar. That should be the other way around. And another ambush. Okay. So I'm still leaning towards that all of this here is due to Russian infiltration units. And they are now unsure of how many Russians are operating here. Is it something like we saw up here when they just flooded the area and saturated an area with infiltration units before a big push? Maybe. But I'm leaning towards that we are still seeing Russian infiltration units, and that is sort of making the mappers unsure of the situation at large. That would be my interpretation of it. Because if you take a look at the ISW map, they have all of this as Russian claims without any confirmation. Meanwhile, we have confirmed Russian locations down here. We know that the Ukrainians did an ambush down here. But as ISW says, a Russian mill blogger claimed that Russian units were advancing across the street up here. But that was a Russian mill blogger without any claims whatsoever. But when you take a look at the Russian mappers, they're going to include all of this based on mill bloggers saying things, and those claims are then used to update Russian maps, and the pro-Russians are then reporting on it, right? But so far, very little evidence that the Russians are this far into Pokrovsk and operating. So what we know is that the front line is down here, and this is more than likely where the front line is located at the moment. Because, this is from ISW itself, right? So here you have this is a Russian source claimed on October 17th that Russian forces advanced over Prokofiev Street in central Pokrovsk, right? Claims. Meanwhile, take a look. Geolocated footage posted on October 17th indicates that Russian forces advanced in the fields north of Mirnorod, up here. So here you have footage, geolocated, where you have Russians. But here, no such thing. You have evidence of smaller groups of Russians operating, but nothing that indicates a proper push by a company of infantry like we have up here. And here you go. Geolocated footage posted on October 18th shows an assessed Ukrainian infiltration event in the fields south of Leontovichi, right? So you can see here the difference here in how to interpret the maps. The pro-Russians, they have all of this under Russian control. All of this. This is guaranteed under Russian control. Meanwhile, we have, other mappers. They're like, no, can we just at least have some evidence that the Ukrainians or the Russians have advanced or not? And all the evidence so far suggests that the Russians are down here and have not pushed back this main street, as I'm marking out here, right? So Russians have more than likely not pushed back past the red street here, by the looks of it. May very well be operating south of it with this is pretty much a hot spot, and the high-rise buildings here is more than likely where they're trying to push in. They might be in some of the buildings. Every other building is held by Ukrainians, held by Russians. Different floors might be held by Ukrainians and Russians in the same building. But north of this street here, I would say this is where the Russians are operating with these deep reconnaissance groups, these smaller Jaeger-style units that are conducting raids and ambushes and trying to figure out where supply depots are hidden, where command posts are set up and stuff like that, so they can call in artillery and drone strikes and airstrikes on those locations. This is from ISW as well. The Ukrainian 7th Rapid Reaction Corps of the Air Assault Forces reported on October 18th that Russian forces maintain a quantitative manpower superiority south of Pokrovsk, unsurprisingly, but lack full control of the area as Ukrainian forces continue to counterattack. The Ukrainian 7th Rapid Reaction Corps noted that the Ukrainian forces detect and destroy Russian sabotage and reconnaissance units attempting to infiltrate Pokrovsk. And that the Russian forces attempted to infiltrate Novopavlivka on October 16th by leveraging poor weather conditions. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm thinking that these sudden this sudden shift, and now we're seeing ambushes conducted deep into Pokrovsk, are these sabotage and reconnaissance units that the Ukrainians are trying to counter. I don't think we're seeing companies of Russian infantry, battalions of Russian infantry pushing into Pokrovsk and securing half of the town. That does not seem to me as the actual situation currently on the ground. I was gonna show you my map. I just realized Ukraine and how they name their towns. Novopavlivka, southeast of Pokrovsk, right? And take a look at this. Take a look. Novopavlivka. And this is that town I was talking about, you know, that the Russians were trying to push up against outside of. I mean, no, gee, oh, they keep doing this. Zaporizia. Here's another Zaporizia. Oh, my God. Stepove. Another Stepove. What the hell? It's just insanity. Oh, anyway. Yeah, so. Zooming in here on Pokrovsk. Jesus. So, yeah, I think it's a fair assessment that the Russians have maybe managed to push the front line. Let's see here. Somewhere to... what the hell? I wanted that one. To up here, right? That isn't really showing, is it? This is not going according to plan, as it seldom does when I'm doing things. So I think the front line might be contained within this part of town. North is where we have deep reconnaissance units. And I think, well, to be perfectly honest, the Russians are struggling pushing past this line. They may have a building or two within this area here and there, maybe, but they're not in control. We're seeing them continuously bombarding these high-rise buildings. They are not in control here. That is not a thing. Otherwise, they wouldn't be hitting these high-rise buildings as heavily as they are with artillery and everything else. I think that this is a heavily contested part of the town, and this also might be where they can sneak past some units in the cover of night to operate up here, like we said. But I think that the front line is contained south of this main street through town here, and south of the Red Line. And I think the Russians are struggling, pushing into the high-rise buildings. And here is heavily contested area where it's any building, any basement is up for grabs, depending on who has more drones in the area and who is, you know, throwing more grenades at the other side at the moment. So I'm thinking, I mean, these infiltration units, they're doing the job they're supposed to be doing, causing chaos and confusion. That's the whole point of these infiltration units. And it's very effective. This is working just in the way they're supposed to work. Causing confusion. You don't know where the front line is. Have the Russians infiltrated with 2 guys, 10 guys, 20 guys? No one knows. And you're seeing ambushes all over the town, and you don't know how to safely move up to the front line. You can't be sure that you're actually sleeping in a safe place, because maybe the Russians will call in an accurate airstrike on a building that you thought was safe and stuff like that. So these infiltration groups, they're working as intended, I guess I'm trying to say. So that's it for this time around, and just as a nugget here at the end, the Swedish government has said once again that they're considering providing Gripen fighter jets to Ukraine because, the Ukrainians have shown a massive interest in flying the Gripen. And so the Swedes are now once again saying, yeah, we might consider it. We're definitely talking about it. Even though they, like a week or two ago, said that no, Ukraine won't be getting any Gripens anytime soon. Well, I mean, it's so frustrating. Anyway, that's going to have to be it for now. I hope I'll see you in the next one. As always, go på marsch, Ukraine, and give them hell.